You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
Motivation is the biggest predictor of success. How motivated are you? What's driving you? What's your sort of like North Star, your purpose? And if it's like just surviving paycheck to paycheck, like you're motivated to hold on to that paycheck. Don't ignore the signs. Embrace the chaos, embrace the mess, and take what you can learn from it and move forward. And know that if you got through this, you will get through the next one.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ziprecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Amy, welcome to The Break. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm really excited for this. As we were I was talking to you before we hit record here. This podcast is all about breaking mental barriers, dealing with setbacks in order to become more resilient, adaptable, flexible, which are key skills for the future. So the idea of setbacks and how to deal with them, and we all encounter them, is a universal problem. But this topic is so on brand for this show, and I'm so happy to have you here. So you wrote a book that's coming out that people can pre-order.
Yes.
I want you to tell us a little bit about that book right off the bat, and I am going to have so many vignettes and avenues to take this conversation, but just give us a little bit of snapshot, a teaser, if you will.
Of course. And I have no doubt that you're going to take it somewhere because everyone, when I start talking about this book, which is called The Setback Cycle, How Defining Moments Can Move Us Forward, everyone starts to sort of see their own life experiences through a different lens. The reason I wrote a book about setbacks in particular and focused on that word is because the definition of setback is a reversal or check in progress. So it's when you're moving forward in some forward direction and you are unexpectedly bumped backwards. So it's different than, something like post-traumatic growth or learning from your mistakes or Silicon Valley's whole mantra of fail big. It's like maybe all of those things, but it's also its own thing. And so I really wanted to go in depth and explore the concept of setbacks because throughout my entire journalism career, I've always noticed that the founders and leaders and experts that I've interviewed, they really light up when they start telling the part of their story where they lifted themselves up and worked their way out of a setback. And that setback isn't always like a big dramatic moment. Sometimes it's a series of micro moments, but it is always this setback that sort of ends up propelling them forward. And I really wanted to explore that. So I, talked to some neuroscientists, some psychologists, some executive coaches to really understand why I kept seeing this theme. And so I came up with the cycle, which is really like a framework to gently guide you through your own setbacks. And the cycle, how I, kind of take readers through it is illustrated by the stories of founders and leaders and some who you've heard of, some who you haven't heard of, who have gone through the cycle and worked their way out of it.
So in your definition, which is interesting, because I was definitely sort of lumping in, all of the above, but I think what you're honing in on is how we have a vision of our path.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's guided by how we see other people, what success is to them, what a success is to society, how society's set up, how we view success at a particular stage and what our hopes and dreams are. And we often think there's a linear path there. And so you're kind of describing like a realization where maybe life bumps you a little bit to just remind you that, hey, it's not always a linear path.
No, it's not. I always describe the setback cycle as it's not like a perfect circle where each phase is identical or like takes some sort of predetermined amount of time. What a setback cycle looks like is like an S, but it's like a squiggly, misshapen S that was drawn by a preschooler who was just learning how to write for the first time. Because there's so many unexpected ups and downs and bumps in the road that kind of get you where you're going, get you to emerge from your setback. And it's just not circular. It's just not. So
I'm curious, like, I think a lot about how to be really flexible. My backstory is I've done a lot of different, I've changed my career several times. I was brought up in the investing world where you really sort of have to be very flexible. You always have to be prepared, not paranoid, but always able to move and shift. And so I'm sort of fascinated by other people who can take like a very planning approach to life. And have you found in your research that people who tend to get the most thrown off by a setback have any particular mental frame or upbringing or any sort of like thing that ties that group of people together?
I don't know that I have anything quite like that, but I know that people who have experienced setbacks or acknowledged that they've experienced setbacks are much more equipped to deal with future ones because it's not as unfamiliar. They're not as uncomfortable with change. And I think that goes to just, how smooth sailing has your career or life been, right? When we're sort of, how I like to say, floating along, when we're floating along in our lives and like, we don't really hit any bumps in the road, you're not really building that resilience. And so when I interviewed the neuroscientist for the book, she pointed out that our brains are hardwired to learn more from setbacks than from successes, which makes sense because when you're floating along and everything's going well, why would you change anything? Why would you think like, oh, let's reroute, let's take a new path when that path is just going just fine? But for those people, it's just harder when they are faced with some sort of setback. It's harder to reroute. It's harder to pivot, and they're less adaptive to change. And I don't know that there's any sort of like demographic or group or anything like that. That's maybe there's like a level of privilege. And if someone like grows up and is like a little bit more coddled, they're going to be less resilient. I mean, that's for the parenting experts to weigh in on, but yeah, that's sort of, that's like how our bodies like adapt to setbacks.
I do think about that in the context of, raising my kids is, how much does how we bring them up and what we give them versus what they work for, how will that shape them? Again, the idea of becoming unbreakable, I'm driving at that through their eyes. I want them to be very adaptive and change oriented. And a lot of times you hear founders of companies like, oh yeah, we want a hungry people. We want people who have nothing because they're going to work hard and all that. I mean, there's something to it. I haven't looked at a lot of studies on this, but there is probably something to that idea of when you have less to lose, you can adapt and change and outwork somebody who has something to lose.
Yeah. I mean, motivation is the biggest predictor of success. How motivated are you? What's driving you? What's your sort of like North Star, your purpose? And if it's like just surviving paycheck to paycheck, like you're motivated to hold on to that paycheck,
Right.
When it's just like, I don't know, like my parents are paying my rent and I'll just like bump around to whatever job I want. Like you're going to be less motivated to work hard, potentially, not always. Sometimes people are just simply driven and they want to succeed, even if they are, kind of coming into the world with a level of privilege. And, so I don't really think it, I think it just depends on how motivated you are and what motivates you.
I want to get through like a little bit of your framework and give the audience a little teaser, idea of what you've learned. Is there a particular story from people that you've interviewed that we could maybe give as context and then maybe walk through a little bit of the framework and how that person, kind of got over that setback?
Yeah. I mean, I have so many.
You got to pick your favorite or the most interesting, or
I will not.
whatever.
I do not have a favorite. So that is like picking your favorite child. Well, let's talk about. I love sharing this story of Reshma Saujani. She's the founder of Girls Who Code, and she created Girls Who Code because she actually ran for office. She ran for a congressional seat in New York. She went up against like a big incumbent. It's like 15 years ago already. And she was really motivated. She was really driven. She thought she did a ton of fundraising. She got like national attention over this local race. She thought she really had a shot at winning. Not only did she lose, but she lost by like more than 80% of the vote. Like she, as she said, I think it's the first line of the book, it was a spectacular loss. And so she talks about it, and she talks about failure so much. I think she has like a TED talk about failure, but if she hadn't lost in that way, she would never have created Girls Who Code. Now, Girls Who Code is an organization that helps teach teenage girls, age 12 to 17, STEM and coding and computer science, because what Reshma learned on her campaign trail from that lost election, when she visited schools, she saw that there was an incredible drop-off in the number of girls who were taking engineering classes or computer or coding classes. It's probably not computer classes anymore, but it's probably just coding. And so she was sort of alarmed by that. And when she was faced with her setback, and, the first phase is established. So hers was very clearly established. There's other people who sort of like sleepwalk into setbacks, and we can get to that later.
Yeah.
For Reshma, in this setback, clearly established. The second phase is embrace. And that's when you sort of have to like collect the data of why this is a setback, why it impacted you so much, and what you can learn from it. The third phase is explore. And it's like, what can you do now? What are your options? What opportunities are in front of you? And what might you be curious about to explore? And so as Reshma worked her way through the embrace phase and really started to like understood like, okay, I lost, and this is why, and this is what I learned, she kept going back to that, experience of visiting schools and seeing the drop off. And she was like really impacted by that. And that's what led her to create Girls Who Code. She started just like visiting schools and doing like a program here and there and like a little class. Now to date, I think that program has taught like over 500,000 girls how to code. And that's going to impact the future of the workforce and the opportunities for women to stay in the workforce. Do you know what I mean? So it's like her setback not only benefited her from creating this wonderful organization, it's benefiting society as a whole. And, she always says like, she's like, don't get in my way when I have an idea. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it boldly. And I'm just going to make it happen, because she's been through like several setbacks. And so she's just not afraid of failure.
It makes me think about one of the, at least from my own experience, one of the greatest, I think, lessons in a setback, or I guess blessings that can come out of a setback, is you just have a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think in her, it's simple, but it's sort of profound. Like, I think in that story, yeah, I just sort of imagine like what would happen if she won it, right? And if she would have lost marginally, she might still be in politics as well. But because she got crushed, she was really thinking through in a different way and in a different intensity level what she saw firsthand. And she tapped into this, intrinsic motivating factor that really propelled her to take on a different path and to have some of the confidence to take on, something new. It's sort of interesting.
Yeah. And then that, like I said, if you are someone who has become comfortable going through setbacks, and that like failure won't break you, you have a little bit more confidence and a little bit more resilience when you're faced with your next one.
Yeah, it reminds me of like I was going through a really hard time a couple of years ago, and I was working with a coach and a mentor, and that person just said to me, Mike, your entire, like, every time you've gone into one of these challenges, like, you've come out the other side. You've been able to adapt.
Huh.
And I was like, damn, like, all right, there's actually a body of evidence here. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do it on this next one, right?
No.
Life's uncertain, but I have to listen to that, right? I have to listen to the fact that I do have some type of track record here. And that can be all you need, to be able to sort of face that setback head on.
And it's always so interesting that sometimes other people can see it in you more than you can see it for yourself.
Yeah.
I see that all the time.
And that's what I kind of meant by that perspective shift. I mean, you're forced into it in a setback. You're forced to look at yourself from a different perspective. Whereas a lot of times, if you're struggling with something, the best thing that you can do is go talk to somebody else about it. Anybody, it doesn't even matter, because they are going to see you a different way than you are seeing yourself. And I think that's sort of that mirror of what happens within a setback.
Yeah.
Can you recap again? You were using kind of the words of the cycle.
Phases.
The phases. Can you recap again what those were?
Sure. So the first phase is establish, because establishing that you are in a setback and recognizing the moment you're in is not always as intuitive as you may think. The second phase is embrace, and that's when we have to sort of acknowledge the moment we're in and take in the information and help ourselves to understand why this is a setback, what went wrong. It's like you're just like collecting the information, you're collecting the data. The third phase is explore, and that's when you take all that information and you use it and you start to, like we would say in the tech world, you start to beta test.
Right.
And you start to go explore your options and try new things and dig down into like your deep-rooted curiosity and, kind of come up with like, okay, what do I want to do? What am I good at? And like really kind of mapping out the next potential phase of your journey. And after all that exploring, you have come up with a plan and you enter phase 4, which is emerge. And that's when you come out of your setback.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
The phases seem like, I mean, I'm thinking, I'm closing my eyes and I'm thinking of, a person like you referenced.
Yeah.
Almost retreating into a deep, dark cave with a notebook and being very self-reflective to work through those. Is there any other way around it? Give me some of the tactics in there that have really helped people, because I'm a big journaler, but I don't think it's for everybody. Some people can't take to it. I'm with you on the phases, and I'm wondering how people enact that in a better way.
Well, look, I mean, we don't all gracefully go through each phase in the most productive way.
True.
Right? But I think journaling is a great tool, especially if it's something where you're like reflecting. Right? You're not just like outlining your to-do list and like your top tasks of the day. You're like actually reflecting on what went well today, what didn't go well. There's one exercise I have in the book called the alarm clock checklist, and it's meant to wake you up if you are sleepwalking through a setback. And a couple of the pieces of that are, doing a mood tracker, listing your activities for the day and rating your mood, and then going back after 30 days or 60 days and making those connections. Like, am I anxious on days I have to meet with my boss? Am I like sad, or do I have low energy on the days that I have meetings with a certain client or when I have to do this task? And it's just, it kind of helps you recalibrate, what you're energized by and what you're disengaged with. So that is, could be an interesting journaling prompt. Actually, at the end of the book, I have all the exercises listed out. So you can kind of like go through it, because the exercises are throughout the book and they're kind of buried within the stories that are illustrating the concept of the setback cycle. But then at the end, it's like a recap of all the exercises. So, and I do know people who have read the book and they take the end as a little journal, because it's, it's not just for people who are going through setbacks. It's for people who want to sort of understand the pieces of their life that maybe led them to where they are today. And it's just also an interesting planning exercise if you feel like you're maybe at a moment. It doesn't need to be a setback. It could just be like a moment of, oh, I need to make a decision. These exercises will help. So I have people who did the alarm clock checklist only to realize that they are actually quite engaged with their work. So it's just, again, the embrace phase is collecting the information and deciding what to do with it later in the explore phase. So yeah, I'm all for journaling. I probably don't do it enough, which is maybe a weird thing for a writer to admit. But I want to do it more. I feel like I do like planning. Like I have a planner.
Yeah.
I like outline my to-dos of the day. But I'm gonna get more into journaling. That's like a future goal.
That's funny. I'm not a planner in any way,
Yeah.
other than really thinking about sort of my future self and who that person is.
Yeah.
And then working backwards from that and trying to do those things today. But I don't do a lot of linear planning. I've encountered my own millions of setbacks that have thrown me off course. So I've thrown plans out the window, and I try to just be as foundational and adaptive as I possibly can.
And that's great. You got to do what works for you, you know?
Yeah. You have mentioned something that I want to dig into. So you've mentioned the words sleepwalking through a setback a couple of times here, and you've just piqued my curiosity. I'm assuming the vast majority of us that encounter a setback are in this category in some way, shape, or form. But talk to us, like define what that is, and give us an example, maybe.
A lot of us just kind of go about our day and make decisions based on what we think we should be doing. And maybe those decisions have landed us in a place in our lives that are not as congruent with our values or the vision that we had for our lives. And of course, that vision can change and shift, and your priorities change throughout the different seasons of your life. But a lot of people who find themselves just sort of like disengaged with something, again, it could be a relationship, it could be a situation, a living arrangement, a job. They just keep like floating along and waiting for it to get better and not doing anything about it. And so they just sleepwalk into a setback. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people I interviewed for the book, again, once you see your life experiences through this lens, you're going to see everything through it. But a lot of people I interviewed for the book really didn't see their experiences as such, or some of them kind of like woke up when they started talking about it and said, oh my God, I think I'm in a setback. And it can take a really long time to kind of wake up from it, because it's also like, do you want to wake up from it? Like,
right.
Do you want to, because it's effort to change, it's effort to pivot, it's effort to like, get your life into a place where you want it to be. So like if you take something like divorce, for an example, some people they know what they have to do, but it's like this big hurdle ahead before they can get to, the outcome that they want, which is obviously getting out of this maybe potentially bad relationship and onto, a life that they're living on their own terms, by their own rules, and potentially finding happiness with someone else. But the sooner you start to make those changes, the closer you'll be to that other place where you want to get to. Again, whether it's a relationship, a job, a location, something, again, that just like gets you a little bit closer to where you want to be. A lot of people who go through the setback cycle don't realize that they were in a setback until they're in phase like 3 or 4. So, yeah.
Yeah. This one's so interesting to me because I definitely see the majority of people that I work with are in that, I would say, sleepwalk phase, right? You make decisions early on in your life, post-college, pre-college, in college, first job, all of these things, right, that set you on some path. And the inertia of that path is so great. And society is set up so well to sort of keep you, the carrot dangled in front of you, that it's very easy.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the word inertia, because I have that word in the book, and it says like, are you where you are right now because of a conscious choice to be there?
Right.
Or because of inertia?
Yes.
So many of us move forward because of inertia rather than conscious choice. And you could also like you could be in a setback in one aspect of your life and like very engaged in another. And so it's, it's not like if you're in a setback, everything has to fall apart,
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like the, God, I'm going to butcher this, but there's kind of that meme out there on the internet that like a 1%, if you're off 1% on a heading, you end up being like 60 miles away from your destination after a certain period of time. It's like that with our careers, where like you're just set off on this course, and a lot of times until you have like a midlife crisis at 40 or something like that, you don't realize how far off course you are. And so I end up working with people like that are now in a very big setback that they've sleepwalked into. And now they have so many constraints around them too. Like they have this lifestyle. Yeah. They have this lifestyle that's just been IV dripped, into them.
Totally.
And that's the sleepwalk case, right?
So many people in life. Sorry. So many people in my midlife have come to me, and, there's a lot of like, oh my God, I have been at the same job at the same company for 15, 20 years. I got everything I wanted. Is this all there is? Why did I work so hard for this? What is next? The book, when it went on pre-sale, The Setback Cycle, hit #1 in midlife management. So if you want a group that this book is really resonating with, it is certainly, I think it's the midlifers. I think it's the recent college graduates who want to like understand what they're in for in terms of like building resilience and building a career that's true to their values.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I didn't even know there was a category called that. That's amazing.
Me neither, but I learned that when I hit #1. So
it's a good way to learn about it, I would say.
Yeah, I'll take it. I took a screenshot. I'm very proud.
Excellent. So, one of the things I read, I think it was on your site, was you use storytelling as sense making. And I thought that was really interesting because I feel like how we deal with setbacks is a lot based on how we end up, what we choose to believe, or how we shape the narrative of our experience and the stories that we tell ourselves. And I'm curious if that was a motivation for you to get involved with this topic, or am I just completely
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. So I do make sense of the world through the stories that I tell. Usually I'm telling the stories of other people. What I realized on this whole book journey, right? And don't forget, I've been writing for 20 years. Like I've been a journalist for a long time. What I realized on this book journey was that I was so attracted to these stories of setbacks because I was working through my own career setback while I was writing it. And so I am also a person who sleepwalked into my own setback. When I returned to my marketing job at a marketing agency, when I returned to it after becoming a parent, after going on maternity leave, I was pushed aside a little bit. My role was reduced a little bit. I was very coddled. I was like, given the kid gloves, and it's not really what I wanted. I was very ambitious. I wanted to put the energy back into my work. And over the course of a few years, like I kind of didn't realize what was happening. Everyone said, oh, that's great. Like you want to go back slowly. You want to ease your way back in. But when people tell you what you should want and what you should feel, and that's not really jiving with how you do feel, right? I felt like pushed aside. Like it wasn't my decision to like take a back seat and like let other people run things. Like I wanted to come back to the role I had left. And it was a setback. It was an absolute career setback that I like willingly sleepwalked into because everyone told me it was going to be great. And it wasn't until years later when another one of my colleagues said, you were really pushed aside when you became a mom. And I was like, oh, you saw that too? Like, you noticed that? If you noticed that, maybe it was real. And what happened was, I did have all this energy and ambition, and I started writing more. I started writing people's stories more, and I started probably asking about the challenges they faced more because I was facing my own challenge. And writing this book about career setbacks was a way for, me to work through my own setback. And when you are experiencing something and you start talking about it, you realize how many other people are experiencing something so similar. And I was like, oh my God, like, all right, I am seeing these trends. I am seeing these things that people are doing to get out of their own way or out of other people's way and just like forge new ventures and build the thing they want to build and live the life they want to live. How can we all do that? And that was sort of the impetus for this book. And also my own career setback paved the way for me to do more writing, get the book deal, take on consulting clients because I had more visibility. And, years and years later, I was, caught up in a round of layoffs, but I had already started running my own business and I was fine. So
yeah, that's great. You had built your other option. Like I always tell people the greatest preventer of unhappiness at work is just having another option. That might be like, it's the ability to just say, I don't have to put up with this anymore. So that it could be a side hustle. Yeah. It could be a side business. It could just be a great relationship with somebody at a different company. And you could go there in a heartbeat. But just that, like the freedom that you feel from having that option and knowing in the back of your mind, like at any moment I can be gone.
And I had that, but amazing. I also told myself like, oh, writing isn't a career. You don't make any money writing. So this will never be a career. But lo and behold, it was my absolute life raft. And it led to what became like a really great marketing consulting career, and I never could have predicted that when I was really like going through my setback. But I had my other outlet and I used my other outlet, my creative outlet, my sense making of the world.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, like you do something enough, you get good at it, and then people pay you money to do it. So the little hobby took center stage and became my life raft.
I want to do just like a quick crash course in your story and how I relate these types of things to clients, because it's so interesting. There's an upside to uncertainty.
Oh yeah.
Nobody, like as human beings, we are not equipped to see. We are equipped to see very clearly the downsides, right? Yeah. So like in your story, you told yourself all of these things and you downplayed, the upside because your brain can't imagine that that's a possibility for you, but it very clearly can see the downsides and the risks. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece is the essence of being stuck. You highlighted so well. It's 100 people telling you what success is or how good your situation is, and you not feeling the same way.
Yep.
And you're stuck because you don't know what to do with that.
Yep.
You're like, I must be the oddball. Like I must be weird because I don't feel the same thing that all of these people, look at all this proof. They're all telling me one thing and I don't feel that way. I don't know how to deal with that. And that's the essence of being stuck, which is so, it's just a perfect story. I couldn't have written it up better myself.
Yeah. I wrote it. It's in the book.
Excellent.
I wrote it as I was literally, I actually got laid off like 48 hours after I submitted the final manuscript.
Oh, wow.
And I had written the like being sidelined after maternity leave piece of it, but then I got laid off and I just like called my editor. I was like, so I don't work there anymore. So I can add a couple of things because things are different now. And also I just have to like add an end to the story because now it's like a little bit full circle. So that was like added in at the very end.
That's great.
Yeah.
I got to ask about the layoff piece because a lot of people that I talk to, have layoff anxiety.
Yeah.
Did you were there signs?
Oh yeah.
This was okay.
Oh yeah.
What were the signs and about how long was this? Obviously you were trudging on a path, in a different direction. So you must have had some signs, but what were they? And how long kind of was this process?
The process, I think, was years long. I think myself and a few other leaders on my team had sort of flagged that the business that we were running wasn't sustainable for a few different reasons. And then I think just like there were a lot of tech industry layoffs, like mass layoffs in 2023, like 2022 and 2023. Right. Our business was suffering and there were many rounds of layoffs at my firm. before I was even caught up in it. Like there were several rounds. I know like the business was tanking, like you shouldn't ignore. And I had a colleague who was also caught up in the layoffs with me. And I was so prepared. I was not surprised at all. I remember actually like in the meeting where like my manager and the head of HR were like telling me that I no longer had a job. They were like, you seem to be taking this very well. And I was like, I'm not shocked, you guys. But my other colleague, like, I think had this perception that, oh, like we've been here for a really long time. Like we're not going to be affected by that. And like, no, you are. And also let me tell you, for people who are afraid of getting caught up in layoffs, I think what I got wrong is I always thought, and I had been at this firm for 8 years, and I always thought, well, if I get laid off, I'll have a little bit of runway because I've been here so long. I'll get like a really good package. I think industry standard is 2 weeks per year worked there. And so I had been there for 8 years. So I thought, all right, I'll at least get like 4 months of severance and that'll be okay. No, and I can tell you what my package is because I walked away from it. My package that was offered to me originally was 8 weeks. 8 weeks, right? And that's not going to get it done. Not going to get it done. So I negotiated. I tried to negotiate my severance. And then the agency wanted so much control over what I wrote about them in the book. And I was like, that's inappropriate. Like they wanted to like fully edit it and have like not pay me anything unless they were okay with what I wrote about them in the book. And I was just like, that's absolutely inappropriate. And I walked away from the severance package completely. I didn't take a dime, but I didn't sign any sort of NDA, so I can tell you this story. And so what I want people to know is severance is a first offer. It is the beginning of a negotiation. But also, don't expect, if you're afraid of being caught up in a layoff, don't expect that you're going to get a big cushion. Because I don't think those big packages that a lot of the tech industry workers got in like 2022, I don't think industry standard is like being felt across certain industries. So don't expect that you're going to get a nice cushy package, because I expected that and I didn't get it. Made it easier to walk away from, but
yeah. And that offer, it's a start of a negotiation, but you don't have a whole lot of leverage in the situation generally.
You do actually, because you have to realize that your company is buying something from you. They are giving you a sum of money and they are buying something from you. They are buying either your silence or they are buying your cooperation in exchange for, again, like money to hold you over, potentially like healthcare and COBRA. I think that's like a big decision. And I don't think that everyone can walk away because they're, again, in the US, your healthcare is sort of dependent on your job, and that's a whole thing. But just don't expect that you're just going to get a big package. But also don't accept the first offer. And you do have more leverage than you think, because your company doesn't want to go back and forth for a long time. And remember, I think it's really important to remember that they are buying something from you. And most companies give you like a 21 to 45 day period to negotiate your sever, to like decide whether to accept the package or not. Use that window, talk to people, get advice, hire a lawyer if you can. Companies don't want to they want you to take the package. They want you to keep quiet. They want you to not talk about, the bad stuff that happened to you or whatever it is. They don't want you to disparage them within the industry, no matter what industry you're in. And so I think that people do have more leverage than they may realize in severance negotiations. However, I also think like people need to be really smart and realize that like they might not get the big package that they are expecting, and they might not, their job might not be as secure or stable as they think it is. And so, like you said, come up with the backup plan, come up with the life raft, talk to people at other companies, talk to people outside your industry, and always be exploring your options, because that full-time job security that once existed is sort of it's faltering. That perception of stability is just that. It's a perception.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ziprecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that's just the reality is that nothing is certain. Even if you're a top performer, there are reasons that companies get rid of different departments, and it's not your fault, right? Like at all. But it is your fault if you're not prepared in a way that allows you to get past that setback in a way that doesn't spiral you in other areas of your life, right? Like, and it's not that difficult. If you just, again, like to your framework, like if you just accept that one fact that I could get fired, you start to look at the world a little bit differently.
You look at it very differently.
Yeah.
And just don't make decisions based on assumptions.
Right.
Right? Like thinking of my colleague and myself, like I paid attention to the cues and I knew I was not immune. And unfortunately, he had a different perception, So it was tough.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a person who I knew, in a previous work engagement relationship, and he ended up getting laid off. Like this was, I guess, last summer, and I talked to him, and he was like, "Man, I'll tell you, I took this new job, and I'm on good footing, but man, I'm gonna always be networking because I never want to get caught with my pants down again." And I'm like, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's true. It's true.
It's too bad that and it's too bad that it took that event and him going into a high state of anxiety for a prolonged period of time to come to that realization. And that's, I think, part of what I'm, trying to help people with as well is like, this is the world, and this is change is happening faster, and this is just a reality. So how do we build a skill set that enables us to weather this and get around these setbacks in a more graceful way?
Yeah. I have a friend, her name is Christina Wallace. She's a Harvard professor, and she wrote a book called The Portfolio Life.
She's been on this show.
There you go.
Yeah, she's great.
Hey,
she's
know
great.
her.
Yep.
I was going to say you should have her on the show because she talks about how you have to look at I think she used to talk about it in terms of like your career portfolio, which is what I did. Like I had many different aspects of my career, not just my one full-time job that I was at for a long time, but your whole life as a portfolio. And what are you giving to this slice of it? And what are you giving to this slice of it? And how much is this taking up, right? And I just think it's so smart. And I quote her in so many Forbes articles because she's so smart. And I feel like every time I write a piece about like going off and, starting your own business and how that process and how you can kind of like overcome hurdles, I always reach out to Christina for a quote because she gives just the best advice.
Yeah, I had her on, and it was probably one of our most successful episodes. I had her on because of the title of that book, and what I talk about very much in my coaching is creating your options portfolio. Always having options, not too many, but always having options. Whether that's another job, another skill set, a side hustle, like it doesn't matter. But the idea of having options makes you flexible, and if you can allocate the right amount of resources to your portfolio, when you encounter a setback in one area, you're bolstered by the other. And it's just sort of this natural balance. It requires, splitting some of your cognitive ability and focus, but like it's totally doable. And there are entrepreneurs now that are literally calling themselves diversified entrepreneurs because they have, several different income streams. And so, she was fantastic. And just that work, that use of portfolio is
so smart. Smart.
It's so
have you heard of, in your coaching, have you heard of the ABCs of scenario planning? Like,
no, actually.
Okay. So that's
that's part of my, Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say that's something that I have in my book that an executive coach who I
Okay.
interviewed gave to me, or like told me about. And so I wrote it down and put it in the book. It's about planning different scenarios when you start any sort of new venture or project.
Yeah.
So there's plan A, which is the ideal plan, what you want to create. And most entrepreneurs, when they go, or even, corporate workers, they just focus on plan A.
Yep.
They don't have time. They don't want to think about what happens if it fails or if something goes south and they have to pivot. So too many people just do plan A. What is recommended in this approach is you plan out plan A, the ideal plan, plan B, what happens if something goes south or parts of plan A, fall apart, and then plan C, which is the backup to the backup plan.
Right.
And it gives you not only like a sense of control over the outcomes, it, I think, does what you're talking about, which is, allows you to be a more diversified entrepreneur, just a person who takes that portfolio approach to their life and career.
Yeah. And the neat part about that approach is there are actually like steps you can take early on that kind of move the needle on all three of the plans too.
Totally.
There's just, learning different skill sets that are applicable to all three, building team members that can help you with, there's all sorts of ways that you can find synergies when you do that help, a little bit. The other piece of this that I really like, and then I'm going to switch, topics because I know we're, I want to be cognizant of your time, but the idea of doing a pre-mortem, on whatever you tackle. So like companies do this, right? Or I think Jeff Bezos at Amazon's maybe famous for instilling this, but the idea is that, all right, we're embarking on a project, we're taking on something. Let's just assume we fail.
Yeah.
Why would we have failed?
Yeah.
And that helps you set those scenarios too. Like that helps you think about problems in advance, set those scenarios, and then think about what would you do in those situations. So assume, I this is again just natural to me. Like I took on a corporate job, I went in and assumed this would not last, 8 years, right?
Yeah.
I figured it would last 3 at the most, either because I want to get out or, something else happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So like going into that, like why would I want to leave or be fired and what would I do? And that's just such a it's an empowering exercise. And I think it helps your confidence to be able to say like, okay, I'm assuming a setback is going to happen and here's what I would do about it.
And also, I think when I got laid off, I just feel like I had played out that scenario in my head so many times of like, I don't know. I just like, maybe it's just because I maybe understand the realities of like a woman over 40 in marketing. And I saw like kind of what happened to other mothers at my firm. And I was kind of like, I feel like this isn't going to last very long. And I didn't ignore it. And it was like so sad. And I wish I had a better solution other than just like waiting for the inevitable to play out. But, when it happened, and I'll never forget that they were like, why are you handling this so well? I was kind of like, I've kind of gone through this in my head and like expected it to happen one day. So I'm just not that surprised. And I'm good because I never collected unemployment. I had clients.
Right.
Because I had been building in the background, and I when you know, and we're so inclined to ignore the bad and focus on the good. But as long as it doesn't spiral you into rumination or, obsession, I don't think it's bad to ignore the bad, to ignore, look at the signs, take the information and take action based on the information you're collecting.
Yeah. I feel like we all sort of live in Whoville. Just like everything's good, don't ever acknowledge anything bad out there.
I have a whole chapter on like toxic positivity, how like positive psychology actually paved the way for what we now know as toxic positivity. It's very interesting, I think.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna definitely read that chapter. I think that's insightful, and it's
gonna speak to you. I feel like
for sure. All right. I want to wrap this up, but give us one more story from the book. So I recognize some names on this list. You talked about Palak. Give us like Robin or Kendall or like Amanda. I follow Amanda. Like, give us one of these other stories from the book, and then I have a couple rapid fire questions to wrap you up.
Sure. Wait, I want to talk about Amanda because she has a really great quote in the book that I think you and I were kind of like talking about before we got to recording. But so Amanda Gatz, she is like serial entrepreneur. She's been a CMO many times, but she grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and she got married really young. She had kids, like she had 3 kids when she was like under 30, and she had this big job. Like she was very high up in marketing at the Knot Wedding Wire. And she recognized that all of a sudden, her career was lighting her up a little bit more than her marriage. And it took her a really long time to acknowledge that what she really needed was to separate from her husband. And again, like growing up in this sort of conservative traditional town in the Midwest, there was a lot of stigma around that. So it took her a really long time. She went to therapy, also stigmatized. And so she kind of like worked through all these values that had been imprinted upon her to get to a place where she was able to acknowledge what she needed and then go ahead and build a life that was more, I think, true to who she was and what she wanted to do. And so she finally got a divorce from her husband. But when she got divorced, obviously she went through a lot of anxiety and turned to alcohol a little bit. And what she realized was, that just made her more anxious. And isn't there a better way to relieve stress than just turning to alcohol? This was in like the very early days of like the CBD industry, when that industry was super stigmatized and there wasn't like a dispensary on every corner like there is now, especially in New York City where I live. And she started like researching just like the benefits of CBD. And she created this whole wellness company. She left her job to go all in on this, again, like very stigmatized wellness company. Now she's a single mom to 3 kids. And then the pandemic hits. So she was just like, oh my God, what is happening? But it turns out that the pandemic, made people really stressed. And she kind of hit that industry like at the right time when it was like in its nascency. And so she created this incredible company, and she just did all these like really incredible things. She now has like a newsletter. She's helping other people like take ownership of their time, their work, their balance, things like that. And her quote that I wanted to share with you was, because you're all about the break and being unbreakable.
Yeah.
And I said, but what if sometimes you have to kind of let it break to build it back up? And Amanda's quote was, a lot of people feel like they're holding up a heavy wall, if you can visualize that. And all of a sudden the wall just like, it crushes them, it falls down. But once the wall falls down, what you realize is the whole room opens up. And all of a sudden the opportunities are endless. And that is how she felt when she finally allowed, sort of like the shattering of her life as she knew it, to build something completely new and completely at odds with, the values she had been raised with. And, I saw her a couple weeks ago, and like, she's happier than ever. And she's so proud of what she built. And she recently got a book deal. I actually set her up with my agent. So
Nice.
she got a book deal. And so I just think like all the people that I interviewed for the book, they created a life on their own terms, but they also used what they learned to benefit society in some way. And that's kind of what I hope to do with all of these stories, to not only, tell you the stories of these great people and illustrate how people work through setbacks and the psychology and science behind setbacks, but hopefully to help you when you encounter your next setback, so you can recognize it and understand how to work through it, and understand that there is going to be, more opportunities for you and more possibilities than you ever could have imagined.
That's a great story. She's great. I follow her on socials. A wealth of knowledge. And I love that quote. I mean, the break is about figuring out the limitation that you need to break in order to get beyond. So we got to break stuff. We got to let stuff fall sometimes.
Sometimes you got to let stuff break to become unbreakable.
Exactly. Exactly. You got to choose your breaks.
Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
I got a few rapid fire questions and I'm going to let you get out of here. I know you got a meeting.
Do it.
Okay. All right. Is there a recent author, thought leader, or influencer that you've come across that has really caught your attention that you think everybody else needs to know?
I just finished reading Joe Piazza's The Sicilian Inheritance. It is a fictional novel talking about many generations of women. One's set in Sicily, one's in America, and it's like a murder mystery. But I got an advanced reader copy of it, and I was like, this is a business book. Because it's like a fictional novel, but the characters are so strong and so resilient that I feel like you read it and you just kind of like, you finish the book. I mean, it's like a juicy, interesting novel, and you want to figure out like, how did this happen and what really went down? But at the end, you kind of feel like very empowered to do whatever you want and to sort of like buck societal norms and just like go for it. So it's a very inspiring, empowering novel. And I think it's like a masterclass in business leadership.
That is fantastic. My next question was going to be, what book are you reading now or have read recently that has influenced you? And it might be, maybe it's that one. Is there another one?
I love that one. Right now I am reading The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store.
Ooh.
But I'm just at the beginning of it. So I'm liking it. I'm liking it. It's interesting. I'll let you know how it goes.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have one piece of advice for someone just starting out on maybe how to deal best with the inevitable setbacks that they're going to encounter?
Don't ignore the signs.
Love it.
Embrace the chaos, embrace the mess, and take what you can learn from it and move forward. And know that if you got through this, you will get through the next one.
Love it. Don't stick your head in the sand and work on that foundation to be able to move up, around, through that, whatever obstacle is in front of you. That's great.
Exactly.
All right. Last one, or second to last one. A lot of negativity in the world, anxiety. We talked a lot about setbacks, but what's something that's got you really excited about the next 12 months? Send us home with some positivity from your life or society at large, the world. Give us something positive.
I think there's a lot of positive in the world. I think that people are more, everyone talks about how we're so divisive, but I think people are actually more aligned than they realize. And I think you can have conversations with people in your community and realize that we're much more connected than we realize. I was recently invited to give a TEDx talk.
Cool.
And it came out of a conversation I had with a person I met at a conference who happened to talk to her intern later that day. The intern had caught wind of this incredible event happening and mentioned it to this woman. And because I had just made that one little connection with her and taken the meeting and just like caught up over virtual coffee, I was on her radar. She sent my information to TEDx, and lo and behold, they invited me to speak. So number one, make the connections, take the coffee meeting. And number two, be nice to the interns, because you never know what kind of incredible opportunities they're going to send your way.
It's a great story. The collision course of the world conspiring for you.
Right time, right place. Truly.
That's amazing.
Truly.
Excellent. All right. Last question is, where can people find you online, learn more about you, follow your story, and where can they pick up the book?
The Setback Cycle is available for pre-order at all major retailers. I have a little bit of information on it at thesetbackcycle.com. And I am on social at Amy Show, AMYSHO, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Excellent. Everybody, get out there, buy a copy of the book. I'm getting mine. As soon as we hang up, I'm definitely ordering that, getting on the pre-order roll. Amy, thank you so much for being here and talking to us about setbacks. This was super helpful, and it's a topic that we all need to get better at. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. You're very good at this.